Hey guys, welcome back to Carib 21 Network. So today I'm talking about a story coming out of Barbados. So the government in Barbados, they are trying to push through some legislation to regulate the short-term rental industry in Barbados. And this is what a lot of people are calling an attack on Airbnb. So this is something that I've been following for a while, at least 3 years now. And we have seen a trend where different parts of the world, governments across the world, they are clamping down on Airbnb for different reasons. So Barbados is now the latest. And it is so interesting because just a few months ago, we were talking about the Jamaican government trying to put through a similar legislation like what we see in Barbados today. And it is just so interesting that the government of Jamaica and Barbados, like they are going about this legislation in a similar manner. We saw similar things taking place in some countries in Europe. We saw in Spain. We saw some, like in some of the major cities like Barcelona, Madrid, where they are talking about like over tourism in those parts of Europe, and the government they put through legislation to clamp down on Airbnb because the complaint is that they in some parts of Europe they're seeing too much tourists there, and they're saying that look, the fact that Airbnb offers affordable accommodation that is contributing to it. When you look at North America, like Montreal, New York, they put in similar legislation, but their excuse was housing shortage. So in New York and in Montreal, the government pushed through legislation to clamp down on Airbnb businesses, and they're talking about like, look, these Airbnb short-term rental, they are affecting how the housing crisis. They're causing a housing crisis in Montreal, in New York. But in the Caribbean now, as I said, we saw Jamaica and Barbados, and they are taking the same approach. And they are talking about this as regulating the tourism industry, which a lot of people are coming out now and say, like, this is a bad idea because Airbnb is a big part of what is happening in the Caribbean. And as I said, I've been reporting on this for a while now. In Jamaica, for example, in 2024, Jamaica recorded 30% of arrivals to Jamaica stayed in Airbnb. Over a million, a little bit over a million visitors that visited Jamaica, they stayed in Airbnb and they spent close to $1 billion staying in Airbnb. So that is the type of money that locals are able to make from the Airbnb. So Barbados now, we see Barbados pretty much doing the same thing. And let me just play a clip of the news report that is coming out of Barbados talking about the government legislating, trying to pass this bill to regulate the short term sector. So let's play the video right here.
Accommodation Bill 2025, which recently passed in Parliament and is now before the Senate here in Barbados, is facing growing opposition from stakeholders in the short term rental sector. Industry players have launched an online petition warning that the bill in its current form could force the closure of many of the 6,000 small and micro short term rental properties, potentially resulting in a revenue loss exceeding 300 million. Minister of Tourism and International Transport Ian Gooding Agile has outlined the key provisions of the bill, which seeks to introduce regulatory standards for accommodation providers.
If persons are going to be offering vacation rental accommodation, that is absolutely necessary that they license. So this section makes it an offense to operate, advertise short-term rental accommodation without being registered, inspected, and licensed. And Mr. Speaker, when we look at it, clause 4.3 of the bill, it makes it clear that if a person contravenes this process, that the person is guilty of an offense and liable on conviction, a summary conviction, to a fine of $250,000.
Okay, so this bill here, this bill is bad for so many reasons. This is a bad idea for the people of Barbados. So Barbados, so Airbnb contribute a lot of money to the local economy across the Caribbean. And I went to Barbados roughly 10 months ago, and I stayed in an Airbnb. And the Airbnb that I stayed in was a retired teacher, and this is how she's making her money now. So a lot of people are looking at this as the government taking money out of the hands of locals. And this is a very controversial bill because, as I said, this is not only in Barbados. We've seen it in Jamaica. And one of the conversation that is happening in Jamaica is that, as I said, 30% of people that stayed in Jamaica in 2024 stayed at an Airbnb. So the conversation on the ground is that the big hoteliers, the big hotel investors, that they are forcing the government. Some people went as far as saying that they're paying off the government to kind of get Airbnb out of the way because Airbnb is cutting in on their profit margin. Just imagine, as I said, 30%. So all of those massive hotels that you see in Jamaica, 30% of people stayed in Airbnb because it is more affordable. And when you go to a place and you want to go around and you want to tour the island, Airbnb offers you like a more affordable package where you can just go and travel, rent a car, and go around the island. So this is the same thing with Barbados. When we saw in the video reported that over $300 million were made last year from Airbnb in Barbados. And I am assuming that passing this legislation and regulating the Airbnb industry in Barbados is going to cut out at least 50% of Airbnb in Barbados. And those people coming to Barbados, going to Barbados, are going to end up staying in hotel. So you could look at this as taking away opportunities from Bajans, from people that are trying to make a living in Barbados, and the money is going back into the hands of foreign investors. This is what it looks like to me. So let's continue watching some more of this video.
However, owners and operators of small short-term rentals argue that while they support the introduction of standards, the bill fails to address the industry's most urgent challenges and risks disproportionately affecting smaller operators. Some have criticized the bill for requiring accessibility features in all buildings, noting that even government facilities have yet to meet such standards.
All tourist accommodation must be universally accessible for the benefit of the disabled community. Now, Mr. Speaker, this is very important. And that is why we've made provision at clause 15 within the bill, 15.1, which says that tourist accommodation which is built or renovated after the commencement of this act shall be universally accessible for the benefit of persons with disabilities in accordance with the prescribed requirements.
Existing operators would have 5 years to become compliant or apply for exemptions. The bill is scheduled to be debated in the Senate on Wednesday, September 24th.
Okay, so as I said, this is a bad idea for so many reasons. This first thing, this is taking opportunities away from locals. There are people in Barbados, there are people that live in the diaspora that have their house in Barbados and they don't feel comfortable renting it out, and they see an opportunity where they can use it for Airbnb and they are making good money from Airbnb. And one of the things that I don't understand with because as I said, Jamaica is taking the same approach, and with these regulating these Airbnb and these short-term rental to fit the standards of the tourism industry, like to me that makes no sense, because for anyone who books Airbnb is tightly regulated. Airbnb is one of the most tightly regulated companies, because if you, for example, if you operate an Airbnb and you get numerous complaints, they are going to kick you off their platform. There's certain standards that you have to reach in terms of putting up your property on Airbnb. And for the government of Barbados to have a fine of up to $250,000, can you imagine that? Like you are someone that invested and you have your 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom house, and the government is going to say, like, if they catch you, if you're not registered, you're going to pay up to $250,000. That just sounds crazy to me. That sounds like a fine that you'd find some 100 bedroom or 200 bedroom hotel, not someone that's operating a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom short-term rental. And as I said, this have sabotage written all over it. And I will say the same thing for all of the Caribbean islands. And one of the most important thing that to take note about this legislation that is going around in the Caribbean, it is so crazy that the Caribbean islands that are doing this are the ones that depend heavily on the tourism industry, the ones that have a lot of hotels in their islands. These are the only Caribbean island that's pursuing these type of legislation right now. So this just don't look good. This seem like there's something behind this, because when you look at, as I said, you, for example, look at Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, they don't have like a booming tourism industry. They don't depend on tourism in Trinidad and Tobago. There's no such legislation like this currently going on in Trinidad and Tobago. You look at St. Vincent and the Grenadines. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they are increasing in their tourism. They don't have enough hotel rooms in St. Vincent and the Grenadines now, so they heavily depend on Airbnb. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they are not pursuing a legislation like this. So it is just so interesting that the islands that heavily depend on tourism, Jamaica, Barbados, Bahamas, those islands are the ones that are trying to clamp down on this. So when people are out there saying that, look, this is about protecting the hotel business, this is about Airbnb and locals taking away some of the clientele from the big hotels and they want to protect their money, you cannot blame people for thinking that way, because this makes absolutely no sense. In terms of the regulation also to make it compatible for people with disability. Again, with Airbnb, you go on Airbnb and it's like a la carte menu. Anything that you want on Airbnb, you can find. If you want to find a place with accessibility for people with disability, you can put that in on Airbnb, you'll find it. If you want to find an upscale property, you will find it. You can rent on Airbnb from 100 to 2,000, 3,000 per night. They have everything on Airbnb. So this is just not making any sense to me. And I know that there's a petition in Barbados, and I hope the people of Barbados will fight this, because as I said, the Jamaican government, they are doing the same thing. And what is interesting about what is going on in Jamaica also, they brought this to Parliament and the opposition spoke out against it. And because it was election time, they tabled it and they're like, you know what? We're going to seek consultation. After the election, not even 2 weeks after the election, no, this is back on the table. So something is going on in the Caribbean, and this makes no sense to me, because you would think that with the Airbnb, the $300 million that they're reporting that goes into Barbados, with Airbnb, what will happen is that money is spread across for a lot of Bajans with small properties, and they are making not generational wealth, but they're increasing their wealth, and the money stays in Barbados. When you put that money into the hands of these big hoteliers, the all-inclusive hotel, that $300 million does not stay in Barbados. The profit from that $300 million will just leave Barbados and is in some offshore account somewhere. So you think that the government would want to protect local small investors who are investing in Airbnb and not try to take this opportunity away from them. So I don't know, but this is just not looking good. So guys, sound off in the comment section and let me know if you're in Barbados. Do you agree with this new legislation about short-term rental, regulating the short-term rental? And if this is about regulation and about safety and about protecting Barbados tourism product, why does the government have to have such a steep fine? Why can't the government regulate the industry and make it easy for people to operate? Because when you look at Airbnb is already taking about a 20 to 25% of per night rate from the host. So if you operate an Airbnb and you're collecting $100 per night, Airbnb is going to take $25 out of it. Why can't the government just put a small basic tax on it and not come up with these crazy things? I don't know. But sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.